Welcome to the Juku Word Podcast. Today we have Seth Hurd on the show. Seth is a previous seven-figure e-commerce seller that exited his company in 2021 to scale, brand, expand, an omni-channel e-commerce launch software designed to help sellers boost sales and reach more customers. And he's on a mission to help e-commerce sellers achieve an omni-channel expansion and explosive revenue growth. Today's podcast, we talk about something very interesting about how to produce your life's best work and answering the right questions in order to do that. Excellent, Seth. Thanks for being on, man.
Thank you, Raul. Appreciate it.
So for everyone who has not been on the pod, I usually send out a form just to get some preliminary information before we jump on the live podcast. Seth filled out his form, and I have to read this out because I appreciate it, and I think it'll dive right into why you're here and like the story you want to share. It's 1 a.m. and I'm still working. So you filled out the form. It's 1 a.m. You filled this out and you're still working, but you say it in a positive tone, not because you have to, but because you want to. And I really want to dive into that. And I know it's bizarre, right? Entrepreneurs if you leave the 9 to 5 just to work a 60-hour work week versus a 40-hour work week or a 100-hour work week. But I'm curious to know, like, what excites you the most about your business, and why are you excited to continue working because you want to?
Yeah, that's a great point. So it is weird because you leave the office and to have more freedom and flexibility. But what I found is that I actually work way more now than I ever did working for a corporation. And it's just because I do love what I do. Mostly what I find is probably the most gratifying, providing value. I always tell people, don't try to make money, try to provide value, and money will come. And in doing that and finding ways to help people and provide value to people, help them grow their businesses is really the most gratifying aspect to that. And I had mentioned finding your why. Simon Sinek always says, start with why. Finding what makes your business go. Why are you doing what you do? Why are you selling the product that you're selling? Why are you providing the service? Being able to answer that question is probably the most profound thing that I had to do early on in my e-commerce journey, is find that why. And when I did, the implications were tremendous. We saw a huge increase in sales. I was able to exit my e-commerce business for 7 figures last year. And I think I 3x'd the valuation in just a year after finding my why. And we can talk about that more a little bit. But being able to answer that question, I recommend watching his TED Talk, Simon Sinek's TED Talk, Start With Why, or reading his book. His book is phenomenal as well, to really understand what your why is. And you can see those implications play out in your own business, in your own life.
I feel like it can be really glossed over. Oh, just ask why 7 times. But I really want to go to dive into that, because I'm sure that the initial answers to your first question, why, were not, I don't want to say surface level, but I can assume that they weren't as strong or as compelling. Can you talk us through a little bit more about your mulling through that internal conversation, or with a team of why do you do what you do? What's the mission? Why do you actually care? And how you've worked to get to a place where you were satisfied with the answer, but also took that as fuel to achieve the results that you achieved. And I don't want to overlook that, because that is monumental, that doing a simple exercise like that can result in an output of which like you're still in the journey.
Yeah. So early on, I had a health and wellness business. We sold on Amazon or on Shopify store, on Walmart. And being in the health and wellness space was gratifying. I knew that we were helping people, but I was always focused on revenue. And that was my why early on in any business. I think anyone that starts a business, that's how it starts. It's I'm doing this to make money. I'm doing this to provide financial freedom so that I can hang out with my family more. And sometimes it works, right? If you're able to spend a lot of time with your family, maybe that's your why, and that's fine. But for me, I found that there was something more, like I needed more meaning behind what I was doing to really get me to get more passionate about the product I was selling, basically. And so I had our whole team do a brainstorm session. And what was really cool is you see this synergy play out with your team when you start to explore your why and why you do this. And you almost feed off each other's energy. And we found that we really wanted to give back to a nonprofit organization. And I was really passionate about reforestation efforts. And so what we started doing is we found a nonprofit that did reforestation, and we started doing 10% of our profits to them to help reforest areas of Nepal, Indonesia, and Madagascar. And so after doing that, and after continuing these monthly contributions, they actually invited us to Nepal. We got to see these reforestation regions. We got to see the villagers that we were helping. It was one of the most emotional experiences of my life to see the lives that we were changing. And so that gave me fuel to want to wake up, to want to do good work. I mean, throw that out there, but wake up and do good work and get out there and help people. And the result, even though it's counterintuitive, right, giving more of your profits away actually helped us increase our business, increase our top line, and grow substantially because we found our why, because we found a reason to really continue to expand our business, because we could give more money to this nonprofit.
And with that too, I want to highlight the journey, because you mentioned earlier that in the beginning it's normal. I want to make revenue, I want to make money, this needs to work. I think that's the natural progression. But moving into something that you actually care about, and it makes a huge difference. You're actually making a realistic, tangible impact for someone else's life besides your business. And that we can dive into how that plays an important dynamic, not only in philanthropy, but also in us as humans to actually contribute. I think that's the highest calling. If you look at Maslow's, it's contribution right at the end or at the top of that. But I also want to emphasize, and for our listeners out there, is that the journey, and I can't stress this more, the journey matters significantly, because I know the end outcome. The beginning might be we're growing sales, we're hitting X profit and whatever. And that's cool. That's important. You need to do that. That's like the lifeblood of the business. But the journey, how you play the game of the journey, how you decide to show up, the actions that you decide to focus on will determine your destination. It's not the other way around. It's not the destination that will determine the journey. It's how you actually live about the journey.
Absolutely. Love it. Yeah, 100%. And you know, you talk about, like, when you come to the end of the road, you're going to want to talk about how much money you made, how much profit you had, what your profit margins were. You want to talk about the journey, right? The story is really, I think, the most important part of any business or any journey. It's about your story. Create your story. What do you want to tell people? Not to sound dramatic, but at the end of your life, what do you want your story to sound like? That's really what's important.
That's the key. Tell me a little bit more. So I'm assuming you have a team, right? Like, how large is your team?
So I exited my e-commerce business, and now we have a software called Brand Expand, which helps drive external traffic to listings on Walmart, Target, eBay, Etsy, Amazon. So we help third-party sellers grow their businesses essentially and launch products, launch their business. Right now we have 10 full-time and 8 part-time. So we're continuing to grow. We just found an investor, growing the business pretty substantially here in the near future, but it's really exciting. We're in the SaaS business now. So we're creating a software to help third-party sellers, not just launch products, but also KPI and tools to help them understand their return on investment and different metrics. Basically what I wanted to have when I was a third-party seller. I saw a need for that and started the software business.
Huge essentials. And we'll dive into the business. And the reason I bring that up specifically is you mentioned that when you started giving back, and it sounds counterintuitive, how did that affect your team? How did you show up differently? How did your leaders show up? And how did the dynamic work with the team?
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's pretty common that nobody really works harder than the boss. So if you're not working very hard, you're going to see that kind of play out. Even in the world where everything is virtual, it's weird. Like, your team still knows if you're on vacation, even if you're not, like they know if you're checking in, they know you have to lead the team. And if you show passion for what you're doing and you show that you have purpose and a reason behind what you're doing, your team, it's really going to permeate across your entire organization. They're going to get excited and they're going to show up early for work, and their passion will show to customers and clients that you want to bring on board. And of course, that's how you grow your organization. So it really starts with you as the leader, as the CEO. And if you do have that passion, you do have that reason for what you're doing, again, that will permeate across the whole organization and then help you, grow your business.
That is so true. And it's not just leading by example, but it's the energy that you bring to the conversation. Is why it's important to serve this customer, because of this actual bottom line. And I dub it your true bottom line. It's like, your bottom line is your profit and loss statement, but then there's your actual bottom line, where it's what is the impact that we're making to our customers? What's the value that we're actually delivering, and trying to measure that as a true KPI. But I've seen it in person. Like, I'll share a story. It's like a confession. Won't say when, but I do know that I was extremely, during a very peak heavy season, I had someone come on and we were working, and I was like, here you go, talk to you soon, because I was like slammed. But then because of that, it does create the environment where if it's not working too hard, or he's not working too hard, or I don't hear from him, the perception is not working too hard, then I won't work at the level that I know. And as a leader, I think it's important to maintain those habits. And we can talk about the habits that maybe that you've instituted when it comes to sharing the vision, communicating with the team. And I'd love to know a little bit more about that, because with that, it's not just a one and set 90-minute session once a month with your team. It's every call, every Slack message, every email that you send out.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about being passionate for what you're doing, if you think about it almost in terms of fuel, right? You have to eat to have energy, but you also have to have passion for what you're doing. So it sounds exhausting to show up 110% on every call, every meeting, every engagement with your clients and your organization. But if you're very passionate about what you're doing, it's fuel for that. So it's not as hard as you think. You just have energy. And there's plenty of examples of people that seem like they have just boundless amounts of energy. These people just are on fire. They love what they're doing so much that it's almost effortless for them. So I think that's a good point.
It also encourages the team, and I appreciate that. We can dive into the habits and we'll dive into the business, but it also encourages the team, because I know that right now, and with what's been happening around the world, how you might have been remote the whole time, but remote work, the shifts, people's interactions, the statistics that are happening, I think it's important to understand that your team, how they experience the journey also matters. And the way that you lead as a leader will dictate that experience. If it's a positive one or negative one, you set the rules. How do you want to be perceived? How do you want the team to perceive the environment? And I think it's important, like now more than ever, to be cognizant on not just having full energy and just being overwhelming, but also being conscious around how the other person is feeling based on the Zoom call, the environment, or the virtual room that you're in, and translating that through. Talk to me a little bit more about you're growing this, exciting that you have investors. I'm curious to dive into how you're growing, but you solved the major issue because you experienced it first, correct? From there specifically, tell me about how you identify the issue because you lived it, but then dissected that into a SaaS offering, which I love, and how you've started to grow and the trajectory that you've had since then.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was launching products, omni-channel and when I say omni, multi-platform, so Amazon, Walmart, we were on Shopify. I found that I was constantly launching products. We had 150 different SKUs, which each had their own child variations. And so I found that getting traffic there, relying on just internal traffic, like pay-per-click ads within the Amazon ecosystem, for example, was not the best strategy. And when you get to a 7 to 9 figure seller area, you start to realize that you have to find a way to drive external traffic. The agencies that were doing it at the time, this is back in 2018, there just wasn't a lot of good options. There was one major competitor that was really leading the space, and I could see how you could do it way better. And then there were a couple of competitors that were charging enormous fees that you couldn't possibly justify an ROI based on the fees that they were doing. And I basically got fed up with one of the launch agencies I was working with and said, you know what, I'm just going to start I'm going to build this for myself and for my network of clients. I started a consulting business and wanted to help them as well. And so it started very small. I found somebody who I used to work with in the past, brought her on board, and we just started doing it for a small group of clients. And just based on, we didn't do any campaigns. It was all word of mouth. We just grew, teamed up with $1 million seller network. There's hundreds of a group that gets together and they all collaborate and everything. And so it got, into that group. And then we started getting tons of clients. We got to a point where, it was really the best case scenario. We got to a point where we were doing about 40 to 50 concurrent launches, which was really capping out our bandwidth. And we couldn't grow anymore. And so I was like, okay, naturally the next transition is to build a software so we could automate this. And so in 2019, we started building the Brand Expand SaaS. I thought that software, I was like, just take this network of G Sheets that we set up and put it into a software. How hard can that be? It's incredibly challenging. If anyone is getting into software development, I would love to talk with them because there's a lot of pitfalls that I could have avoided had I known then what I know now. But we ended up going through 2 different dev agencies over the course of a year and a half. And eventually, after throwing a ton of money at the software, I really got lucky based on luck is really opportunity meets preparation, right? So we ended up finding somebody through somebody I networked with that became our lead developer. And then he had two other developers that he worked with, and they are still with us now. They're phenomenal dev team. And we were able to finish the software 4 months ago now, after 2 years of developing. And so it's been an incredible journey, a lot of stress, but you learn so much along the way. We talked about journey earlier on, right? You know, there were moments where I'm just like, why am I doing this? I'm so stressed out at the cash that I'm pouring into this and I haven't seen a return. If you love what you're doing and you really truly believe in the value that you're going to provide or you are providing, just stick with it, right? Because like I said, if you provide that value to enough clients, eventually that will flow to your bottom line and you'll start to be profitable. And that's what we're seeing now.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad that hearing the story that you found lead devs for the team, not just an agency, because I know that's one of the key for non-technical founders. And tell me a little bit more about the journey leaping from the consulting to the services now to becoming a software, because that leap itself is, I don't want to preface it as a danger zone, especially for non-tech founders, but it is not your experience. It's not easy, but it's also, there's like 101 ways to die in the business, like the business to die. So I love to know how you've navigated that to the point that now you have someone who sees the value, wants to actually invest their own money. So that's a reward in terms of people pay by their dollar or vote by their dollars. Tell me more about that transition, how you navigated that, because it's definitely, there's very few who finish that race.
Yeah, definitely. And I understand now why there's very few that are able to successfully implement a software business, especially non-tech founders, because even today, and that's why we're actually, the investor that I'm speaking with is actually coming on to coordinate and collaborate with the dev team because he has a tech background and I can coordinate with the sales and accounting teams and stuff like that. So we have very complementary type skill sets, which is really important when finding a C-suite type of executive to work with you. So that's going to be huge. But the transition, yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, honestly, especially if you're not tech. Letting go of knowing how your software functions, because I'm really good in Excel and I created this entire network. It got to a point where it was ridiculous. Like the formulas and the macros that we had going on to operate the business I was like, just don't touch it. Like, don't delete anything because you're going to screw up the whole spreadsheet, the way that it flows. But taking that and then building a software where you have no transparency into the code, or you don't know how to edit the code, or there's a point where I was like, should I learn how to code? And I'm like, there's no way, right? That's a full-time job to learn that. And I started to, and I was like, there's just no way I can do this. It was incredibly challenging. The biggest thing that I learned was you just can't have a dev agency. We tried 2 different agencies. And the second one, I was like, it was through a referral. I was like, this guy's friendly, he's trustworthy, he'll be on our side, it's going to work out great. Ended up just throwing a ton of money. And what they do, and then there's a complete conflict of interest, right? They want you on as their client for as long as possible, but you have strict deadlines, right? So they drag out your software as long as they possibly can. And they'll do things like fix their own code and you're paying for it. And you're like, this doesn't make any sense. So just finding the guy that's our lead dev now and the 2 guys that work with him, finding those developers that you can trust is really important. And then ideally finding maybe a co-founder that has a tech background is also very, very important. And that's how we made the successful transition. And at that point, we had exited our business, our e-commerce business. So I had money that I could reinvest in. But at this time, when we were talking about $500,000 that I invested of my own money into the software, without really having any ROI at this point, without finishing it. So yeah, it can be very stressful. But if you believe in what you're doing and you see the end of the tunnel, just keep pushing forward and you'll get there.
Not to gloss over that either, like in the persistence over time, that's usually the winners. If you persist over time, and I love your focus, your diligence, and even the grit, really the grit
Angela
to do that.
The book Angela Duckworth wrote about grit. It's all about the people that persist, the people that win, and those that have grit. They get up and they keep going at it. A lot of people emphasize you have to be so smart or you have to know certain people. It's not it's really just getting up and continuing to push forward. If you believe in what you're doing, that grit will pay off eventually.
Oh, absolutely. And absolutely. And I'm excited to see how, now that you have investment of that flow coming through, how
Mhm.
you continue to grow. And we'll chat offline to see if I can connect you with any other software founders that I had on the pod.
Yeah.
As you're leading in this transition in this new time, tell me how do you manage yourself, not just mindset? Because I know like right now, what word on the street heading into downturns, like private investments are going down, but you're getting the wins early on. You're focusing on growing this cash flow and ensuring that we have future customers and supporting current customers. How are you maintaining that focus and that drive with the team and with yourself personally every day? Because I think that's one of the things that we miss on most podcasts, and that's the goal here, is to like what's the highlight, the what no one else sees on the show.
Really, for us, it's about continuing to roll out more features that are going to
Mhm.
provide more value and thus mitigate churn. It's when you have a SaaS, it's all about mitigating churn and keeping people on your software. And the way to do that is to provide value, right? Give people a reason to
Yeah.
stay on your software, stay on the subscriptions. And so we're constantly discussing new features that we could be rolling out, things that are going to be unique to our software that other people aren't doing. And just being an omni-channel software, there's just not a lot of them out there, really. And I see a huge migration to omni-channel, really away from Amazon, because third-party profit margins are diminishing on Amazon so much that there's going to be a mass migration to other channels. We see that with Etsy. There's been like a huge growth in the number of Etsy sellers over the last couple of years. Walmart, bought up Jet.com to build out their e-commerce infrastructure. I'm very bullish on Walmart. And so, yeah, to answer your question, to wake up and to continue moving forward, we see the potential in the software we're building. And so you can see, I don't want to say the end result of what we want to build, but right, this is the ultimate software that we're trying to build. And just having that road and knowing that we just need to continue on our journey and continue moving forward, no matter what the environment is or what the economy is, I think that will really help you continue to push forward.
Oh, absolutely. And then that's one of the key things that I want to highlight here too is regardless of what's happening outside, if you focus on the basic principles of your personal health, your mental health, the
Totally.
business health, and those financials, with the grit and persistence, you will see it through. But I think it's the encouragement for us to continually have that. Hopefully, this pod can be part of that, but also the network that you have.
Also, we didn't even touch on this. I know we got to go, but your health and wellness, physical and mental, is extremely important, and definitely prioritize that as well. That's very important. Can't be understated.
No, absolutely. Just one quick question. This is just like a last fun one, and maybe you're not, or maybe you are, but are you entertaining or looking into Web3 to incorporate with the SaaS?
Yeah, I think we're open to that. Definitely. We're looking into incorporating crypto in there as well. We're seeing these trends fold out in front of us and definitely considering them. There has to be certain, I think, adoption of the trend first before we move into it. But it's really exciting.
I saw a Gartner report, and I think right now we're way early adopters, but the early majority looks like about June, July 2025, 2026. So it's just interesting to see. Well, Seth, for all the listeners out there, what's the best place for people to go to, one, thank you for this episode, and two, learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You can head to brandexpand.us, check out our software, connect with me. I love talking with third-party sellers just about the latest e-commerce trends. Even if you don't use our software, I love networking. I think providing value, networking with different third-party sellers, sharing their journey is great. Head to brandexpand.us, connect with me, and we'll go from there.
So we'll put those links in the show notes. Seth, thank you again, man.
Thanks, Raul. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being here with us today. It's an honor to be a small part in your journey. If you like today's episode with Seth, please consider sharing this episode with someone who you believe might be impacted from it. You never know, you may be the catalyst that has made a dramatic impact in that individual's life. If you have any feedback on the show, or you have a topic suggestions or guest suggestions, please go ahead and email us at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. And as always, this is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.